Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Todd Fernandez with Climate Crisis Policy, and I'll be your host today. We're in the middle of an exciting showdown over the first big push to pass federal legislation with sizable climate action in history. We are both supporting existing efforts in collaboration with other major campaigns, and we're aiming our sights higher for after this legislative push at mandates and bans on greenhouse gases and fossil fuels. Domestically via the Earth Bill, and now internationally with the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty Initiative. On the Earth Bill front, I'm very excited to report that we have strong interest from a potential sponsor. Just got that email this morning, so more on that later, but this is a very exciting move. But the upshot here is we're asking everyone who has a potential sponsor in mind, either to lead or co-sponsor, to please accelerate your engagement with them and to contact Art Matches, our legislative liaison. We want to ask all of those folks that could even possibly be interested and see where the strongest interest is, because those folks would likely be the first set of original co-sponsors. This will be a journey, but we're finally on our way in earnest, and just hats off to everyone who's worked so hard already on lifting this idea up. The Earth Bill, when you think about it, is essentially parts of how you would domesticate an international commitment to wind down fossil fuels. So these things are all aligning beautifully. So as I mentioned, on the international front, we're very excited that we now have identified this Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty and the initiative to work with. Treaty work can take time, but it's critical that we change the narrative by resetting the goalposts on what's really required. Enforceable mandates to end greenhouse gas pollution or fossil fuels, however you frame it. The Paris Agreement has no binding or enforceable commitments, and the idea of banning greenhouse gases or fossil fuels is not even on the agenda going into COP26, which is somewhat unbelievable, and this is due to the control that major oil interests have, just like it's not on the agenda in Congress. So this initiative, which we'll learn more about today, can be a powerful tool for activists to drive our own demands, demands that will actually stop the pollution fast enough to avert total disaster. The sad truth is that we are heading over the cliff fast. 1.5 warming is only 7 years away, and we can all do the math from there. Everyone except our elected officials, it seems, can do the math. As it stands, the main environmental groups, the Green New Deal Network and the Climate Action Campaign, are working very tightly with the Working Families Party and the Democratic Party. So everyone's in sync and lined up and coordinated, and it's tightly aligned. So what this means is that what's on the table in Congress right now is what we're working with. The Democrats are unfortunately enforcing a filibuster rule that takes real policy off the table, but that movement for the People's Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and the push to end the filibuster is building momentum and should not be counted out. That means more climate legislation could also be possible after they finish the spending pieces. I'll be joining Reverend Al Sharpton on his bus going down to DC on Saturday for March On for Voting Rights, which leaves at 3:30 in the morning. The leaders in this should not be underestimated. From People for the American Way to Common Cause to Indivisible, they are lined up and they are calling on Biden to lead to eliminate the filibuster. Back to climate, and I'm almost done with this. Briefly, we had a powerful and affirming rally outside of Senator Schumer's home Saturday. Thank you, Nancy Lawrence and Terry Michaud, and all involved for a great showing. Its staff and his staff and police were there, so I'm assuming he was not far away. And we talked with his deputy state director. Then the parents and toddlers showed up, and it was both beautiful and heart-wrenching. And I'm just going to share my screen real quick and show you what the children did. You saw this in my emails, but I want to show it to you here so we all see this. So that moment, I can't even watch it again without getting choked up. That moment really shook me. And the idea that parents and their toddlers are having to spend their Saturdays and their lives worrying about this shows such a failure of leadership that it's unbelievable. So I share that with you as a source of our continuing inspiration to take the reins and lead faster and harder. Gosh, I have a few more things to say, but I'm going to stop what I'm saying and get back to it later. Basically, I was going to take you into the demands that we're focused on and the congressional push, but we're going to have Felice Stadler here from Environmental Defense Fund, so we're going to go into all that a little bit later, and I don't want to take up more time before we get into the main event. Let's see, where are we? 12:09. So yes, I'm going to come back to the rest of my remarks about all of that and start with what we're going to dive in today when I'm very excited to welcome the leaders of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty Initiative to tell us about this exciting effort. Already in New York City, we're gearing up to go get a city council resolution, and we're also starting to talk and get ready for making a loud populist demand associated with this for COP26. We've run out of time for incremental measures. It's time to demand real solutions that stop the fossil fuel pollution with enforceable mandatory emission reductions on a timeline. This is what the Earth Bill would do domestically, and now we get to join an international push on this front. So I'd like to welcome Alex Rafalowitz, the director of the Treaty Initiative, and Pernik, Brenna Two-Bears, and Michael Polin, some of whom are on the call. We're already in touch and gearing up with various fronts. We're so glad to have you here and to welcome you. And I couldn't be more excited about your work. Thank you so much. Alex, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Todd. And thanks all of you for having us. Yeah, that video, I got some chills watching that. And I also really appreciate all the efforts that you're doing in the US right now to try and push through the most ambitious and just response to the crisis that fits within the current political constraints. So thank you for your efforts. My name's Alex Rafalowitz. I live on the land of the Muisca people, which is Bogota in Colombia. And I'm helping support a global network of folks who are campaigning for a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. I'll let my colleague Brenna just introduce herself, and then I'll do a quick presentation. I'll also share the link now for the presentation.
Yat she Brenna Two-Bears in she Turchin initially touching dashe when I get a long ship bashchin standing rock su dashinella. Hello everyone, my name is Brenna Two-Bears and I am a Bitterwater clan born for Warrior clan. My maternal grandfather is Red Running Through the Water clan and my paternal grandfather is Standing Rock, and I am the communications associate with the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty Initiative. And I also assist in our Indigenous engagement as well as our youth engagement. And I am on the traditional homelands of the Council of Three Fires, as well as one of my tribes, which is the Ho-Chunk Nation. And I am also Navajo and Standing Rock. And I think that 5-minute long introduction gave Alex enough time to pull up the presentation. So yeah, I'm really thank you for inviting me to the presentation.
I think Todd did a very good actual explanation of what the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty Initiative is, but we're trying to provide a global answer for a demand at the scale of the action that we need. So we want to change global norms on fossil fuels. We want to demonstrate that there's widespread action curbing the supply and production of fossil fuels. We want to try and create the missing frameworks and mechanisms that could lead to international agreements for a just transition. And we think we can help grow the movement calling for the just energy transition, bringing in the idea of equity and analysis as required for the solutions. Some of the ways that we're doing that, we're motivating cities, like Todd referenced, New York City, for example, and as well as countries to endorse the idea and begin to commit to phase out the production of coal, oil, and gas. We're campaigning to increase the transparency and accountability, research and knowledge about the fossil fuel industry. And we see ourselves as complementing other strategies that our movement has. We're a big movement. There are lots of different ways of tackling the beast. Folks are taking on the frontline struggle of resisting the expansion of the industry, incredibly important. Folks are taking on the finance industry as a big lever that drives the fossil fuel industry, incredibly important. And we see ourselves as complementing that with a geopolitical demand on the scale of the challenge that can be targeted at governments. You all probably know this, but just to reinforce the idea, the UN Environment Program has done the analysis to see what are the current plans for the production of coal, oil, and gas, and where would they need to go if we're going to meet a 1.5 degree target. And they're calling it the production gap. And you can see that by 2035, that gap is enormous. I think by 2030, they talk about it being 120% larger than what it could or should be. This is another way of visualizing it. If you think of a carbon budget, here is all the emissions that we could possibly emit if we want to stay or have a chance of staying in 1.5. And then next to it, you can see the expected emissions from the already existing, currently being developed reserves. Not talking about a single new mine, not talking about a single new fracking site, not talking about a single new offshore well. This is everything we already are producing, and it's over double what can fit in the budget. So we have a huge problem. And the International Energy Agency, which is set up to do the economics for the oil industry of developed countries, has even come out and said there's no need for investment in new fossil fuel supplies if we're going to get to net zero. The UN Attorney General said of the IPCC report last week, this report is the death knell for coal and fossil fuels before they destroy our planet. So we've come together and said the climate crisis is intersecting crisis, but the fossil fuel system is at its heart. 80% of all CO2 emissions since the Industrial Revolution have come from fossil fuels. But the fossil fuel system is incredibly complex. It's integrated into our energy systems, as we know, our financial systems, our political systems. And so we have a really big coordination challenge and cooperation challenge as we try and work out how we deal with this together. Add on to that, we know we live in a world that's full of historical and continuing inequity. A world that's been defined by white supremacy, by colonialism, and by patriarchy. And the fossil fuel system has tried to reinforce some of those systems too. And so we've got to try and find a way that as we untangle the mess of the fossil fuel system, we're building and creating more equitable and fairer ways of being and relating to each other. And given that the fossil fuel industry and systems underpin so much of what we do, we also think there is some stability challenges here. If we don't have a plan for how we exit this industry, we're not going to have stability in communities and in countries that are currently set up to be reliant on that industry. So that's why we think we need a global approach to the question. You all might have heard of the Paris Agreement, and you'll know that it doesn't mention coal, oil, or gas. The Paris Agreement was set up to focus at emissions on the end, but it doesn't talk about what do we do about the production of coal, oil, and gas. This is just a quick graph to show countries are in very different situations when it comes to how they relate to fossil fuel production. There are countries that are quite wealthy and don't have a huge reliance actually on oil for government revenue, for example. The United States is one, Canada is one, the UK is one, even Norway is one of those. But there are countries that have a huge reliance on oil for government revenue. Over 30% of all government revenue comes from oil in Iran, in Algeria, in Nigeria, Angola. And those are places where per capita income is below $20,000 a year. So their capacity to suddenly change the structure of their economy is actually quite limited. So we're trying to raise the question, what are the countries up in this corner who are wealthy and not so reliant on fossil fuels? owe to the folks in the other corner who are not wealthy, and yet the structure of their economies is reliant on it. And then what do we need to do to allow the countries that are very reliant but already relatively wealthy to be able to transition off, and then the countries that are less reliant but still quite poor to have the space and time to be able to transition as well. We're proposing a global treaty that would set the norm that first, as we've said, there can be no new production, and then two, would help negotiate how we phase out existing production, and then use that as the ramp to ratchet up the support, the transfers, the technology that's needed to drive an energy transition, economic diversification, and a just transition for workers and communities across the world. There's another graph just showing, for example, share of employment. So you can see that there are countries like China and South Africa who actually have relatively high shares of employment in the coal sector, and they're not particularly wealthy in terms of their capacity to deal with that. So that's another part of the question. So we're proposing this treaty that has 3 pillars: non-proliferation, let's not add to the problem; global disarmament, let's reduce the threat; and then a peaceful transition. And those 3 pillars have been borrowed from the nuclear non-proliferation treaty, which failed in many ways, but we thought provided an interesting international example of how we could collaborate on this question. Another nuclear treaty that we also borrowed from is a treaty for the prohibition of nuclear weapons. What we thought was interesting about that was that treaty started because of a global civil society movement. And that started in the international system by smaller non-nuclear states. So it wasn't the US that led for that treaty, right? It was Norway, Sweden, and smaller states in Europe. And we actually think that this approach is going to be similar. We think it's going to be states like Costa Rica, like Nauru, like New Zealand, who are smaller, who are not big producers, but have a real question they want to ask about what we're doing about fossil fuel production to start this change. I'm just going to run through a little bit more quickly. We are a network, a distributed network. We work in collaboration with a diverse range of partners. It's actually over 600 organizations have endorsed. And we then try and support people to take action regionally. So we have support for groups in Africa, or by constituency, if you're a youth organization or a women's organization or human security organization. We try and support cities campaigns. Brenner is in our media and communications team and helps find media opportunities to talk about it. We have a person helping coordinate research and policy analysis, and then we do some political advocacy and engagement. We're a pretty small team globally, and we're spread out. And what happens in the world happens because there are organizations or there are people who are really passionate about this idea and they're making it happen. Here's a list of some of the folks who are on our global steering committee that help guide us. I think in the United States, you might know May Bovey from 350. You might know Carol from the Central for Environmental Law. You might know Tom Goldtooth from the Indigenous Environment Network. There's some of the people involved. A little graphic of what we do. I just want to re-emphasize this point that we're not the silver bullet to the climate crisis. There is no silver bullet. We need to do everything that we possibly can, and folks are going to be motivated to move to do different things, and we respect that diversity of approaches. We think frontline struggles are essential. We think stopping the finance and subsidies is essential. Stopping demand and reducing demand and changing demand is essential. Getting rid of the influence of the industry in our politics and culture is so important. Driving to liability and reparations, also incredibly important. We feel like we add on to that by giving a global demand at the scale of the challenge. We want to focus on governments and the need for international cooperation. We want to focus on coal, oil, and gas together, because some folks try and spin them out and try and say, gas is clean and oil is better than coal and whatever. We want to try and keep them together as drivers. And we want to give folks something that they can use to campaign in a local and national setting as well. So that's why we've got our cities campaign. So here's a bit of a map of the groups that have endorsed. Some of our core regional partners at the moment. The initiative is getting a lot of media, so here's some of those nice headlines. We coordinated with the Dalai Lama and 100 other Nobel Prize winners to issue a letter to President Biden and all attendees of his summit in April, calling on them to no new expansion without fossil fuels, resource and glass transition, and work globally on the question of production. And we've had cities campaigns. So Los Angeles was one of the first cities in the world, in the US, they've endorsed it. And we have been engaging with the New York City, but there's been a change in the council makeup, and the original sponsor of the bill left the council. And so the bill is currently stuck in committee. I don't know if Anne did join has joined the call. She's our city's campaigner in the US and can maybe talk a little bit more to that if folks are in New York. But Sydney recently endorsed, and cities are mixing these endorsements with local actions that they're taking to reduce the fossil fuel industry. And we've got a whole toolkit of things that they could do, along with sending letters and communicating around the importance of not proliferating the fossil fuel system. We have a campaign hub where you can go log on and you'll find materials that you need to start your own campaign. And then just really quickly, this is our kind of vision for how we're going to realize a treaty. The first step is a club of countries, getting different countries together who want to champion the idea of the need for international focus on fossil fuels. Today, there was a news story that Costa Rica and Denmark are launching potentially one such group. We're waiting for more detail, but we've been campaigning with those folks for a while to try and get them to convene such a group. So that's exciting. We are launching a global registry of fossil fuels. So there is currently no global list, planned, searchable database of every country's plans for producing coal, oil, and gas. And we're going to build the first one, and it's going to be launched at COP at the end of this year, which is very exciting. And we're talking with the UN Environment Program to see if they'll host it going forward. We think that those two things together will build momentum for a global commission on fossil fuels or a formal UN report on fossil fuel production. We see that then as a catalyst for a global treaty regime. So here are some things that you can do if you like the sound of this campaign and idea. You can endorse it as an individual or an organization at our website. We encourage you to share our materials. That's the Twitter handle there. You could start a campaign on a city. There's materials ready, and we can connect you with Anne, who is supporting groups to do just that in the US. You could spark this conversation with your own allies and networks. And also fresh off the press today, launching 3 hours ago, you could engage your congressperson on this question. So I heard a couple of you were looking at engaging congressfolk on an Earth bill. Well, 22 Congress people from across the majority world, so from Latin America, Africa, Asia, and the Pacific, have just today launched a letter calling on fellow members of national parliaments and congresses to sign on. And it reflects the 3 core pillars of our treaty initiative: end expansion, plan for the equitable phase out and resource a global just transition, and enhance global cooperation and treaties in order to do so. And so that's open for signature. We're going to have very shortly a supporting brief that folks can take, but that's something that you might want to take up. So that's the summary of what the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty is. In terms of just going into COP26, we are a network of groups. Many of them will be present at 26, and our intention is to push fossil fuels onto the agenda there. We think the fossil fuels are the elephant in the room when it comes to the UN climate talks. So we'll be doing advocacy and campaigning to see governments put mention of fossil fuels into the record, into the negotiating texts, into the different rooms where negotiations are happening. 2, we're going to formally launch our global registry of fossil fuel reserves, the first ever global database of such reserves. And 3, we'll be hopefully launching this letter from Congress people, where our aim is to have 300 parliamentarians across the world issue this into the COP as a challenge to the leaders meeting there on the need for us to face up to fossil fuel production. We're complementing that as well with a similar type of demand set coming from youth activists in the Friday for Future movement. And we'll also be releasing a couple of reports we think that will support the core arguments about why we need to do this. So that's a bit of a run down on what we're planning to do heading into the COP. I probably started speaking way too fast at the end there, but that's
no, it's great. Wonderful, wonderful. Alex, this is so incredibly important and exciting. So as you all know, it takes time for these kinds of processes, but it's very fun to be on the beachhead of these kinds of things, on the vanguard. Brenna, would you like to add to anything?
Yeah, of course. So part of our engagement strategy, as Alex was talking about, is being able to engage regionally, but also through different constituencies. And so as part of the US, what we are focusing on is trying to connect with some of the states in particular that are not coastal, those that have a lot of the fossil fuel extraction, as well as trying to connect more with some of the Indigenous groups. And on our steering committee, we have Tom Goldtooth from the Indigenous Environmental Network, but we're hoping to connect with more. And I think that Anne could probably talk a little bit more about trying to connect with some of the Midwestern cities and making sure that we are covering all of our bases, and knowing that the US political layout is complicated, to say the least, and so we're trying to make sure that we are able to reach all of the different regions that need to be reached. And I think that is about it, because I think Alex covered a lot of the main points.
Wonderful. Well, again, this is extremely exciting. So are there any other key questions? Let's see. One thing I want to get my mind around more, and I'm already in touch with some of your team on this. So we'll be working on the New York City resolution and getting that ball back in motion. And if anyone on this call is in New York City and wants to work on that with us, reach out, let me know, or just put your name in the chat and I'll reach out to you. Already Catherine Skopik and Robert Kuhnquist have expressed interest. If we get the two of them on it, I think it will be short order. Also, and Nydia, I know you're talking to the grannies about it. If Nydia, if you wanted to join Catherine and Robert, I think we would have a resolution in a few hours of some kind. I'm joking, it will take a little bit more than that, of course, but that would be the team that could get it done. I don't think it should be too hard. We'll see. So if anyone else is interested in your city of going after a city council resolution, we did this in immigration reform. I've done it in various movements. This is the way you get the ball rolling on these kinds of things from the bottom up. And it also was, it's not just a, get the ball rolling type of thing. These are very serious demands, and they really are pivoting the conversation leap years from where it is now at this, snail's pace. So this is how you do it when you're the beachhead in a movement. So I think this is a great path to go. Anyone else, raise your hand if you're interested in going after city council resolution in your own area. Anybody? Oh, a lot of people, I can't see your hands. Anyway, raise it to yourself, I see a few going up, great. Oh, Selden, all right, get some good troublemakers out there. Let's see. So I guess we had some questions. What time is it? 12:33. Are y'all's hands up for questions? Now I'm going to ask people not to ask questions about nuclear. This is not a discussion about the nuclear non-proliferation agenda. So if anyone has a question that's not about nuclear, I saw a hand up, but I don't see them up now. Anyone else? Elaine? Or was that a hand for the wanting to
No,
do this?
yes, both. I'm sitting in a strange place, which is why the camera isn't on. I actually put it in the chat. It's sort of a specific question. So Alex's presentation, CO2 was mentioned, CO2 emissions, but not CO2 equivalents. So since I basically spent my entire research career for 30 or 40 years studying methane emissions from all those sources, I'm wondering where methane fits in here and if, yeah.
And Alex, in answering that question, I emailed a little bit with Michael about this. You know, the phrasing, we're talking ban on greenhouse gases because generally you ban gases as a, approach. And he said it's fine to interchange these concepts, but this is sort of in the realm of that.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, please.
So we were just using the CO2 reference point to make the argument about the substantial contribution of fossil fuels to the climate crisis, and I think the exact percentage is going to vary depending on your choice of CO2 equivalency or your choice of global warming potential and timeframes and so on. But we selected it mainly just about making that point. I think the big distinction between what we're talking about and some of the more traditional campaigns is talking about is that we aren't focused on the emissions. We're focused on the question of production, because we believe that, yes, incentives to change our emissions will have a flow-on effect and change plans for production, but the level of economic, political, and infrastructure lock-in that's going ahead to support the fossil fuel industry is not going to react in time to a simple market signal from a driver on emissions. And so we have to actually address the question of production. So it's not necessarily about the emissions per se, which gas it is. It's about the knowledge. Coal, oil, and gas all drive emissions at the end. And so we need a plan to deal with the plans for production, regardless of whether we also, in addition, have drivers on demand. And that the plan for that production needs to consider the fact, I'm in Colombia, where 15% of government income comes from oil. So if we can't just simply say, no more CO2 emissions, therefore no more oil use, Colombia, just deal with it. And we need to have an actual plan where we say there's a transition plan for Colombia into the global economy that will support stability for the local communities, for the country as a whole, as we transition off those fuels.
Yes.
So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, those are great. And they're not mutually exclusive, if I may. So Alex, can you talk a little bit more about the COP26 and if there's any initiative to bring more of a full court press pressure to bear on Representative Kerry? And I don't even know, I'm not keeping track of who our UN ambassadors are. And what is the process? So do we really need to be taking this argument to the General Summit and the United Nations General Summit? I know we can also bring it at COP26, but COP26 is to work within that framework. So what is the next step to get this kind of thing on the United Nations agenda? Who do we have to convince to get it on the agenda?
Thanks, Todd. Yeah, so US groups, particularly through the Build Back Fossil Free initiative, I've been trying to work out how do they elevate the demand to the US government now and in the lead up to the COP. We don't think that the US government is likely to be a champion for this idea in the short term, given the structures of your politics. But we do believe that our initiative can help you by making the argument that you can see people all over the world are making this demand and the US has to respond to it. So I think that bringing the demand into the US debate will be useful, and then seeing when and where other states, particularly states vulnerable to climate change, start bringing these points onto the COP floor, which is our intention, to then put those in front of Kerry and others to put pressure on them on the question, I think is the basic framework for the strategy that could work around COP. In addition to that, I would say that the fossil fuel registry idea, that there's a global publicly available data on plans for fossil fuel production, might be something that the administration is more open to, and so drawing their attention to it could also be a powerful step.
All right, wonderful. Okay, well, we're going to obviously be staying in touch on all of this. Just so folks know, U.S. Climate Action Network has already met, I believe, with the Treaty Initiative folks, and I'm hearing from their side, and we're talking about this in our policy and international sides. So that would be wonderful if we get that in the mix there for those demands. Fridays for the Future, which is doing a strike on September 24th, has already agreed to add the treaty to their set of demands for that strike. So this is how you do it. We're gonna, basically bring this treaty initiative to the grassroots is what we're doing today. And when you start to do that, then watch out. You don't know what's gonna happen. So it's all of you, this group of people on these calls, you guys have the power to really create a swell with these kinds of things. And if we can swell this demand and buttress what's going on internally and be outside with pressure in the United States, building from September and October, where even greater things are being planned, I think we could maybe retake the narrative, at least to some extent, and take it away from this incremental path to nowhere that we're on now, and start getting serious talks going. Well, with that note, I'm going to thank you both so much for being here. We're very excited.
Todd, I have a question it's Stephen Sondheim. I have a question for Alex.
Stephen, as long as it's not related to the nuclear question.
No, it's not.
Okay,
Is that
go
why
ahead.
you were ignoring me? No, Alex, there's a tremendous thing that has happened, I think worldwide, which is EVs will be dominant in the mid-30s. And our car companies have already committed to it. And I'm of the opinion that you might not even be able to sell oil at some time in there. And yes, I believe we should stop producing it, but when it's no longer needed, they're going to stop producing it. And I wanted you to comment on that, please.
Yeah, Stephen, I think that's largely true, that when it's not needed, they're going to stop producing it. But there are two things that worry me about that future. So one is that all the history, everything we know about ExxonMobil and everybody else that's been involved in the oil production industry is that they will not go quietly. They will use every dollar that they've got, every politician they've already bought, every thug that they've hired in places like Colombia to break unions or whatever else to maintain their power and their profits. And so waiting for the market signals is going to be far, far, far too late. And they're going to use their muscle to try and stop that change happening. So that's one concern I have about solely relying on the signal from the end producers. And the second is that question around the capacity of places like Colombia or like Nigeria or East Timor. There are 400 million people on this planet who live in a country where over 30% of their government revenue comes from oil. And so if we're saying in 10 years, that's just going to go away, but we don't have any plan to deal with it, we're inviting a whole lot more instability, violence, poverty into this world. And we don't want that. So we have to find a way together to plan the right exit from that. So they're kind of the two real motivating reasons for me why I think we can't solely rely on a market signal and about a hopeful future about where EVs will get to, which I'm with you with. I want that to happen, and I hope that is part of the future. But I think it's not going to do it alone.
True. So
I
this
think your
always comes
second
down to the
statement
race
is-
against time. I'm sorry, Stephen, we're about out of time. Go ahead.
Could I just ask a question? Because I can't even post in the chat.
Francesca, go ahead. Real quick.
Okay. So I'm on my town's Energy Sustainability Advisory Committee. We have gotten our town board to do a climate emergency declaration. What I want to know is what would this, in a small town, we're not New York City, we're East Hampton, New York. In a small town, how can we craft this message for a smaller town that doesn't have, we don't produce fossil fuel? If you could just have some ideas of why would they want to do it?
I might throw to Anne real quickly on that very question.
Oh, I didn't see that Ann was here. Please, Ann, do. I would love for you to say hello and introduce yourself, since folks will probably want to reach out to you on this front. I don't
Sure.
see you on my-
Yeah, thank you. It's so nice to be with you all today, and I'm really appreciating how engaged everyone is. And Francesca, I know you from a former life, so it's really nice to see you today. So I am, as Alex said, I work on treaty endorsements from cities in the US and work with local government people and advocates to do treaty endorsements. And it is very powerful for multiple reasons to have small towns and small cities taking part in this. We want to show the groundswell. We want to show the passion. We want to show the interest in this across political stripes, across urban and rural divide, and in all over the U.S. and all over the world. And so, and we've had treaty endorsements in cities large and small, and more conservative and more progressive, and to show how much knowledge there is of the need for us to take this step across these different demographics in the US and around the world is really powerful. And so I would be the person who would work with you, and we've got template resolutions for the treaty. And I also work on the Safe Cities campaign, which talks about, okay, so now our city has endorsed this important step. What are we going to do locally on the ground, while we also keep asking for this international action at the level of national governments? And so I can talk with you about all that, and would really look forward to doing it. There's no place too small, and we do welcome endorsements from individuals, organizations, communities of every size all around the world.
Can you put your email in the chat?
Absolutely.
Can ask that. Wonderful. Thank you, Ann. So I have another question before we go. You have a very highly esteemed list of sponsors and organizational endorsements too. In fact, Friends of the Earth was the one that sent me the treaty. I was asking them about the ban on fossil fuels or greenhouse gases, and they're like, have you heard of this? And I was so excited when I found it. So, it's one thing to get groups to endorse something. It's another thing to get them to take action around it. So I'm going to start reaching out to them myself, the ones I'm working with, to say, what can you do? I mean, they're very busy focused on Congress, frankly, and they're going to say they don't have the bandwidth to even think about this and yada, yada. But hopefully some of them are big enough to do two things at once, maybe. What can we do to get from the top down out through their networks, a group message that goes out from all of them to their constituents to help lift this up as we're going? So we would need that to hit around, late September, early October, to get people excited. And then that way we will also hopefully be able to organize actual physical events around COPs, which we're strategizing around. Green Faith, for everyone's knowledge, on October 17th and 18th is organizing a mass international, really, faith response where they plan to have civil disobedience all over the globe, including in DC in large numbers. So we want to circle back to Green Faith and get this on their list of, we want to get it at the top of everyone's demands. Most groups have 4, 5, 10 demands. We want to get it in the mix. But then we also want to figure out what actions we can take in person. So I'll stop rambling. And any thoughts on that front?
No, Todd, that was great. I mean, and very, very true, because Green Faith has also endorsed the treaty. And so it is always a question for organizations, they like the idea of a campaign and it aligns with their values, but they've got 10 other priorities, and they need to they need to, you know, adhere to their strategy and be accountable to their membership and so on. You know, I think if you're engaging with those organizations, you're a member or supporter of those organizations, you can say, hey, I want to take this forward. I want to campaign on my city to take this action. I'm going to take this question to my congressperson. Yeah, I'm going to talk to them about the reconciliation bill, but they also should know that the reason I'm talking about this is there's a broader global movement that they could sign on to be a part of. We're trying to do organizing, as I said at the very beginning, in a very rushed way by constituency, as we're broadly calling it. So folks who are part of faith institutions could think about how do faith institutions start making this commitment to not proliferate fossil fuels. Folks who are in the healthcare sector, you know, could do a similar type of thing. So that would be another way I think folks could take action and come to this. But in the slides, there's the link to the letter that Congress folks can sign on to, as well as to the guide for city campaigning. And I think they're really two great starting points for taking action. And then that third one around globally coordinated action in the lead up to COP, we hope that we'll be able to do that together also as a part of the broader days of action that are being, you know, convened by folks like Friday for Future and 350 and others.
All right, great. So we're all in this. We can all talk internally on our Monday night meetings at 8 o'clock every Monday about maybe we could think about different targets and go after Senator Kerry a little bit with this, maybe try to get a sign-on letter from Congress. Like if we could get one congressperson to take the lead on a sign-on letter from Congress to the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. Once you get into this arena, there's many places you could apply pressure, but you know, they all sort of zero into the United States ambassadors to the United Nations, Kerry, McCarthy. So you get, you know, but this is another hook for us to get into those conversations with. And as I say, it dovetails beautifully with the Earth Bill, which would be sort of the domestic implementation of such an idea, as you basically require utilities to go to 100%, you know, zero emissions and clean energy. So these are how you implement such a goal domestically. So these things dovetail beautifully. I think we're doing all great work together because we're setting the sites where they need to be. And it's very exciting to partner with all of you. And you're welcome to hang around for the rest of our meeting, but by no means feel obligated to do so. And we welcome you back anytime. And we'll just stay in touch and get on this. I'm excited about going after it in New York City. So thank you all so much. Any last closing thoughts, Brenna, you'd like to share?
Just to thank everyone for being so welcoming, and I'm really glad to join this meeting. So yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
That's Meryl. She's one of our best and most passionate. All right. Well, thank you again, everybody. And the meeting's not over, so don't run away.
We need Ann's email because I just sent it and it got taken back. It got sent back to me. My old email for you.
Oh, Ann, if you could please add your. If you don't mind.
Is it okay if I just say it out loud too,
Yeah.
in case people are having problems with the chat? So it's my first name, ANNE at stand.earth. And I'll put it in the chat again too, but it's ANNE at stand.earth. Maybe I'll change my window to it, actually would help. Why don't I do that? And I'll put it in the chat, and then I'll let you all continue. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right, so in a few minutes, we're going to have Felice join us, who most of you know from the Environmental Defense Fund. So briefly, I'm going to set this up a little bit. And I'm sure there are other things we should be talking about before she comes. Actually, before I do this, I just want to remind everybody, Extinction Rebellion on September 17th, which is a Friday, a major mobilization. So we're organizing in New York for that. Some of our members have joined those organizing calls. Wonderful. And then the strike is on the 24th in New York. I think those are both international action dates, but I can get more information on that. So you'll be getting those, but if you could just start thinking locally about what you can do. The real test here, or the challenge we face, is to mobilize simultaneously with shared demand. Those are the two strategic imperatives: simultaneous action at scale and a unified set of demands. And we're not quite there yet, but it's popcorn, is people are doing things in a popcorn fashion all over, and that's beautiful. But as you know, it's very hard to make the news. It's very hard to break into the narrative with that kind of scattershot approach. So I'm just urging everyone, if I have any clout here, think about how you're going to get your local groups to, instead of doing 25 different actions, to do those and do collective actions as we're getting into COP. And the main conference of the parties for the Paris Agreement is October 31st to November 12th. So just hold those dates. The question is, do you engage before if you're trying to influence? So the answer is obviously before, during, and after, but where do we want to try to put our collective push? That's to be determined still. Just real briefly to set the legislative stage. As you know, there are two major legislative spending packages, one on infrastructure that's bipartisan and one that's a budget vehicle, the Build Back Better budget. There are myriad of climate-related provisions, and there are myriad of opinions, I think, increasingly about the upshot of all of this. One of the key ones to keep in mind is the Clean Energy Payment Plan. This used to be called the Clean Energy Standard. They've switched it to a payment plan with basic incentives and maybe some penalties or fines if those goals are not met. I'm going to post the new toolkit on all of this in the chat right now. Evergreen Action is leading the push on this. What is it called? Clean Energy Payment Plan. So here's the document for that. That's their push. It's a toolkit basically for the next month or so. It's got targets, it's got talking points, all the information you need in one place. So if this is your fight and you want to get in it, there's questions about its ultimate efficacy, but there's no doubt about the fact that it's a step in the right direction. And so increasingly, although I'm very hesitant to acquiesce to incrementalism, I've banged my head against this wall a little bit in every different way imaginable, including actions outside of Schumer's house. I don't think there's a lot of way into this conversation, and that most of these big decisions have probably already been made. So there'll be some fighting around the details. Some of the fights that we really want to focus on is getting rid of the fossil fuel tax subsidies. I mean, this shows you the power of big oil in setting the agenda. We're not talking about banning emissions, despite the IPCC's red alert. We're still talking about how much money are we going to pay the polluters. Think about that. That shows you exactly where the power balance lies and who's setting the agenda. And when you set the agenda, the most important thing you do is make sure you don't have anything on there that you don't want on the agenda. And that's where the real power is. And I don't see that the movement is driving that role in the agenda. The movement seems to be following to some extent, but they are driving a few pieces. So the anti-subsidy piece, there'll be a full court press push on that. Food and Water Watch has an email your congressperson. Friends of the Earth is doing a push. We also have our 5 demands that you've probably seen in various emails. Those include the Earth Bill mandates. What else? I'm skimming my thoughts here. We also have movement in the agriculture front, a little bit on the Climate Stewardship Act pieces with the Civilian Climate Corps. So like I say, they've sprinkled pieces of it in there. So various parts of our mandates, our bills and our bill package are in play. The main variable new demand that we have been putting forward, and we have managed to get it on an agenda for meeting with Speaker Pelosi the other day. Thank you to folks out there who did that. But our ask is now for the CBO to count, to score, they call it, score the greenhouse gas emission impacts from these 2 major spending bills. And that not only gets some measurements on the board for these particular bills, but it puts the Congressional Budget Office on hook and the responsibility of Congress counting greenhouse gas emissions and reductions. And then our second demand, I see Felice has arrived. Welcome, Felice. Our other newish demand is to include a provision in these bills requiring zero emission or low emission procurement for all government spending. And this could be a huge boon for innovative technologies and really actually reduce the greenhouse gas impacts from all this construction. So the upshot, and you'll be hearing this from Felice, is to engage your elected officials constantly in September. The details are going to be written then. We've sent out a list of Democrats to focus on, but I really encourage you to contact your own elected officials. We'll have new emails, but you know how to do this. Write your email, use our new demands, emphasize whatever you think is important, include the request for the treaty support, just get in their inboxes with something, not too long. The shorter, the better. These people are busy. They don't have time to read long things. And not just the campaign staff or the congressional staff, rather. I've mentioned this again, but I'm not sure we're actually hearing it. Their campaign managers, their major donors, their endorsing groups, big endorsement groups, and then the local political parties, the Democratic, Republican, and Working Families Party activists. These folks are very much easier to reach, and they have influence. And so if you really want your impact to be felt, it's about you got to reach them, and then that gets in their heads, and then you've planted the seeds, and that's about as much as you can do sometimes. All right, that's enough introduction. I'm going to invite Felice next to please take it away. Welcome back, Felice. Good to see you as always, and for entangling me so beautifully in all the very exciting national coalitions. I'm happy to be at those environments, and we're pushing and we're pulling. We're pulling with you. And I don't know if you saw the pictures, but we have
Thank you.
Act on Climate signs outside of Schumer's, and the kids showed up, and his staff was there, and the police were there. We didn't see him, but I talked to his deputy state director, Garrett Armwood. And so hopefully you guys are happy with that. Some may be happy, some not so much, but we're there with the team and everybody's wearing the t-shirts. We're just excited to be part of it. And then of course, we're continuing our additional pushes. Please take us away and teach us what we need to do in the next month.
Well, I would just first start by saying thank you to all of you who've already been working on this really important push. I know that I've been a broken record since you first invited me, which I think was back in March or April, that this is our window. And with each passing day and week, it could not be more clear that this is the critical window, and that we have really limited time to impress upon members that voting for these important investments are really critical, and that there's a lot of support at home for making these investments. And then additionally, that they will not pay a political price if they vote for these investments. I think two things, some lessons learned that I want to kind of share that I think can be helpful. One is that any focus on dollar amounts is not doesn't serve us well when we're working to really sell kind of our vision for what we want lawmakers to do. If we are talking about 3 trillion or 2 trillion or 1.9 trillion, like anything, any dollar amount may make sense if you're walking the halls of Congress and you're working on kind of like the nuts and bolts with a legislator. But if you're out in the streets and you're talking to, voters and constituents, and you're talking to reporters and allies, lead with the investments and what the investments will deliver, and the important down payment we need to make to drive forward climate solutions. But don't lead with the numbers, because the numbers are precisely those things that the opposition is using to scare members away from actually making these investments. The dollars don't matter, and in fact, it's kind of fungible money, and it really is confusing and is only being used by the opposition to really paint a really sour picture for these numbers. So again, lead with the investments, lead with the vision, with the opportunity that we have to make a critical down payment in clean energy electrifying the transportation sector and really jumpstarting US manufacturing so we can be global leaders on clean energy. So that's one lesson. The other one is, never underestimate the power of organic groundswell. So it's not about always having like big flash in the pan rallies, like 1 million people here or 10,000 people there. Having a steady drumbeat of visible demonstrations of support is going to be absolutely essential from now through September. It's a long stretch. I know we're tired. It's summer. People are like, last foray of summer. And so just, again, calibrate accordingly, but having that steady drumbeat of organic, sort of visible demonstrations of support is really, really important. I love the pictures that you sent, Todd. It could be tabling at a farmer's market. It could be, doing something if you're going to a Labor Day parade and you assemble 4 people and you all have your signs up and you take a picture with your signs and you put it out on social media. If you're on social media, if you're not on social media, don't fret, send us the picture, put it out on social media channels, or we'll tag the lawmakers in that social media post. Those are all going to be really, really important. Having, again, that steady drumbeat of visible support. I know sometimes we feel goofy walking around in our rally shirts. We're not actually rallying. That's okay. Again, I did that 2 days ago. I was wandering around Tucson with my Act Now t-shirt. So you can be a walking billboard. And if you, again, are going to an event, whether it's a Labor Day parade or a lot of lawmakers are having they're having either barbecues or fish fries or, or whatever other event they might be doing, gather a few people, have a shirt, sign, take a picture. That'll be really important. So organic, ongoing swells of support is really, really important. In terms of kind of what we anticipate moving forward, as Todd mentioned, there is a group of House lawmakers, and I've mentioned this before to you. We call them frontliners. They're frontliners not because they're on the front lines of pollution, but they're on the front lines of the Republicans looking to flip that seat in 2022. So everything happening right now is all about 2022. If you live in a district where you have a House frontliner as your representative, tune into the radio, tune into TV. You will already be seeing probably attack ads, and that is very much being reflected in how that lawmaker is positioning him or herself. So if they're going to be moderate in terms of how they're talking about it, or if they're going to be moderate about being excited about passing a big, Democrat-only bill before a bipartisan bill moves, it's because they are already feeling the pressure. Money is being spent to paint a really, again, sort of sour picture around what these lawmakers are standing for. So the best defense is a strong offense. So we've got popular support for these policies behind us. We've got good voting, good polling numbers. We have really, really strong, diverse constituent support, business support. And so it's our job to continue to just lead with that and make sure that those frontliners feel like they have what I call the permission structure at home to be in a good place on this. So if you want me to kind of remind the group on who some of those priority frontliners are, I'm happy to go through the list. I see there's a ton of stuff happening already on the chat. I just want to see if I'm missing stuff. Oh, great. So a couple things I'm going to share is I will let you know who those frontliners are, just as a reminder, many of whom have already sent letters to Pelosi indicating their concern about spending a ton of money at this juncture. So I will share the names of those individuals. Additionally, there are a lot of events being planned in the districts of these House frontliners, and if these are places that are convenient to you, we'd love for you to come out and be part of these events. Again, everyone is welcome. And the more people we can get out in a rally shirt, holding a sign or not. Some people are comfortable holding signs, some people are not. We would love to have you. I know that Todd shared the list, the Google link where you can get your t-shirts if you don't have a t-shirt. And I'm also going to send to you right now let me find the directory of the events. I don't know if you have that right in front of you, Todd, but I do want to give you the calendar so you can see precisely where events are happening.
So all of that, Felice, not to interrupt. So I gave the CE, the Clean Energy Payment Plan Strategy document, which has all the target electeds in it that came out from Evergreen. I think that's probably a pretty comprehensive list of targets in it. That's in the chat a little bit further up, and I'll send it out over email. And then we also, on our event page, on the Earth Bill event page, there's a link to a lot of events, but these key websites of the Climate Action Campaign and their events page are all linked there. The swag link is linked there. We'll add this payment plan toolkit to it. So if you can't find your way to, whatever, you'll find it on ours. So all that information, I think, Felice, is pretty readily available.
Okay, yeah, and I just included the actonclimate.com/events. They just updated their website. It's a one-stop shop. You can go and you can find where there's events happening.
Now that seems to be focused on specific states, Felice. Is that why they're focusing on the key states where they have, issues they're trying to work on? Because it doesn't have all the states, and so that it's fine, of course, if it makes sense to target, obviously, but. Is that your
right? So what I was just sharing is these are places where I know that there are people on the ground already organizing events. That's not to say that there aren't more events being planned. I know that that there are other calendars that are out there. So what I just wanted to share with you is that these are places where there's a lot already happening, and we could use more help in having people come out. What you'll see in the calendar is the list of many of the House frontliners that the Climate Action Campaign is focused on, but there are additional ones. So if you're in Florida, for example, you have one House member who's absolutely critical, and that's Stephanie Murphy. Now, Kathy Castor is an ally. She's a champion. If she's doing something, it's nice to, it's nice to thank her. But the person who needs the most reassurance is Stephanie Murphy in Florida. If you're in Maine, you've got one House member, and that's Jared Golden. I don't know if anybody's from Maine. I know that state really well. I spent half my childhood there. Maine is either coastal elite or rural not elite, and Jared Golden represents the non-elite part of Maine. Huge district, needs a lot of support. I can go through a couple of other states that are really important. In Iowa, Cindy Axney, really important. She's in a good place, but she's somebody who needs continual positive reinforcement from business owners, from local electeds, former or current, from voters, from constituents. Really important. I can add additional, you've got two in Nevada. You've got Representative Lee and Representative Horsford. Really important. If you're in Nevada, they need a lot of support. If you're in Georgia, Representative Bordeaux, really critical, has already been quite outspoken about being reticent about, supporting a bunch of additional things. So again, there's a lot of benefit to Georgia if you invest in clean energy. It's one of the leading leading states in advancing investments in vehicle electrification and battery manufacturing. So Georgia as a state, from a manufacturing perspective, has a lot to gain, and Bordeaux just needs a lot of reminding of that and reassurance that that she will be in a good place if she votes for these things. What are some others? Texas, holy moly, Texas, really, really important. Lizzie Fletcher, Representative Allred, two really important ones. So again, I'm just in Arizona, it's Representative O'Halloran. So if there's a particular state that you wonder why I haven't mentioned, happy to mention it. But again, the events that are being planned are, obviously strategically located. In Pennsylvania, you've got Representative Connor Lamb, really, really important member of Congress, really, really difficult to reassure that he will not be vulnerable. In Michigan, it's Representative Stevens and who's the other one? Slotkin. They've been really good. They've been consistently good. And the reason is because of the tremendous work that's happening on the ground by grassroots organizations to continue to reassure. So that gives you, New Jersey, yes. I will pull up the name of the person in New Jersey. Give me 2 shakes. Unless, Todd, you know that name right off the top of your head.
Pallone? No.
What's
no.
that? No.
Anyone else? We already met with Pallone a while back. We should probably revisit that meeting. How is Pallone and what about him?
He is good. He's Mickey Sherrill, Representative Sherrill, who's great. And they worked really hard to flip her seat back in 2020. I'm going to respond to these things in a minute. They are, and they were very focused on flipping that seat and they were not successful. So, Pallone is somebody that we put into, Pallone the right way, and we're not worried about Pallone. I don't know what this means, whether he still likes methane. He's never liked methane, so I'm not sure what that means. But I'm happy to better understand that question. And then this really good question was asked about House committees dealing with the budget we should be reaching out to if we have members on them. Great question. I actually don't know the answer to that one. So rather than making something up, I will do my homework and then share it back with you as well. If all of these reps are not on the action plan, you have a list you can share. Yes, I will work on. So my next to-dos is I'm going to do a final list of frontliners of all states. And then I will also give you information about representatives on key committees. We don't anticipate any Republicans supporting this. We saw Republican senators supporting the bipartisan package. I'm not sure that that's going to happen on the House side. That remains to be seen. But right now, what we are most focused on is making sure that as a block, you've got the House members that are really on board and supportive of the bold climate investments that we're all advocating for.
Wonderful. Felice, also, I understand there's a week of action with Friends of the Earth and Climate Action Campaign starting on the 30th. It's just, I don't know if that's being separately branded or whatever, but for everyone's knowledge, there's going to be that push. And I don't know if there's anything more you want to say about that. And then the other thing is timing. If you could just, I know it's all a guessing game, but so the main thing is, I guess, September. And how soon do you think they're aiming to wrap some of this up after that?
Yeah. And I'm actually just looking to see, because I just saw something about the week of action. there's a couple of big ones. One I think is being organized by, you mentioned it, I think Sierra Club and others. So
That's what I meant.
I will get more details about that as well. In terms of timing, I would say sort of two things. One is, you're right, like a lot of the nuts and bolts details, those who are actually like working on the policies is happening right now. I would say for grassroots, like continuing to keep the pressure on, it's really now through the third week of September, which is when we anticipate the recess ending. This is a really long August recess that actually extends into September, which is unusual. So that means that members are just going to be home longer, which only gives us greater opportunity, but also puts greater responsibility on us to keep a steady drumbeat, which is part of the reason why I started out by saying, having ongoing visible signs of support is going to be really important. I know that many of you are building relationships, what we refer to as surrogates. So these are individuals who have particular credibility in their community. They could be a big, business owner. They could be someone in the faith community. They could be a former elected official. And it takes a while to cultivate the relationship and get them to a place where they feel comfortable speaking out in support. This is our window, is to line up the individuals that have a bit more political pull than us as a voter. With all due respect, while every vote counts, some places have greater political pull, and so lining those individuals up to either pen a letter to the editor or put an opinion piece. If you know of someone that is a really good spokesperson that has some political sway and could use extra support in drafting an opinion piece and op-ed, please reach out to either Todd or I. There's a really big communications team that's standing ready to help with those activities. So really through the third week of September is really important.
All right. Well, wonderful. So, all right, everyone, we have our game plan, right? It's basically contact, engage, and get the t-shirts and be visible. It's just, it's about being present now and showing up. And that could just be as simple as an email or active as an action outside of their home or office. And
also, I think phone calls is really important. And so some of you are part of local organizations, and we are looking for phone calls into members' offices and able to, again, help support getting more phone calls into members' offices. So if you have lists of people, you can do, I've done some goofy things, but people have been responsive. I host people, they come over and everyone picks up the phone and makes a phone call. You can use that as a time, like, you can sip wine or sip tea and write a bunch of postcards and send in your postcards. So like you can be kind of, you can combine sort of social gathering, obviously always being safe with your social gathering, but also then using it as an opportunity to activate people. People want to feel like they can do something immediate. And I'm going to post, unless it's easier to send it all in one email, I can definitely also send you the phone numbers. There's some very specific phone numbers we're asking people to generate phone calls into members' offices. I'm going to post it right here. For anybody on this group who's actually part of a really big list, if you're able to guarantee getting a number of organic calls, you might actually get, here's a pretty simple script. It's we're asking people to make a call for climate. And those are the phone numbers you can use. If you're able to generate organic calls, there's a paid phone program that climate action campaign is willing to invest in. You just have to match the number of calls that you're willing to or able to generate. It's really hard to
All right.
generate organic calls, but
This is all great. Any last questions for Felice from anyone? I'm showing you all a picture of our band outside of across the street from Schumer's home, and can't see underneath all the posters, but almost everybody had their shirt on. So we made quite a splash. And then down the block were the kids. As you can see the picture of the kids, they had cutouts of Biden, Schumer, and Pelosi. There's that little stool for the kids to come up and talk to them. And I can barely look at this stuff. It's so heart-wrenching. So anyway.
yeah, does anyone have any questions for me
Yeah.
or anything besides the ones that you gave me
Any last question for Felice? All right, well, we're in it. It's the final stretch.
I want to give you my email again. I know some of you have taken the time to reach out. I do encourage you to, just making sure I can read what I wrote. Please do reach out if I glossed over too quickly, or if you have questions about a particular member. But I think even if it gets back to the committee question or House member, even if your House member is not on one of the short lists, it's still really important for you to reach out to that House member. Every House member should be prioritizing this. And if that House member doesn't, they should find a different job in November of 2022.
There you go. I think that's a good point to end it on. Felice, thank you as always for everything. And it's very exciting to see all the mobilization that's in play on so many fronts. The list that you see on the events page has a handful in various states, but there's over 500 and more. And with this new push for the August week, the last week of action, it's going to grow and grow. This is what we have to do to get things over the finish line. So, all right. Well, thank you very much as always. We'll stay
See you in a month. All right.
Yeah. And
Talk to you.
you're always welcome on our Monday meetings, Felice, but we convey everything. So anytime you want to come back, we don't have them on Monday night at 8 o'clock. It's the only other meeting we have now.
Okay. All right.
All
Thanks,
right.
everyone. Thanks for all you do.
Thank you. Bye-bye. All right, everybody. Well, I just want to end the day, and then we'll stop, and then we'll chat among ourselves for a minute by just revisiting the idea that the Earth Bill has a potential lead sponsor. And so that's very exciting. And it's just the beginning of a journey. Could take about a month, maybe, they suggested. That's not very long. So it just is a big lift, I think, and in the face of other things that are not always encouraging. So we got to take that and run with it. So please double down. Art's on the call. But if you don't have his email, just email me if you have a potential sponsor and you want our draft email that we're using asking for sponsorship. The main point we're making is that we support everything that's happening. So rah, rah, rah on your existing fronts. Even though I'm not 1,000% always feeling that way, I think it's the right thing to do in solidarity and strategically. And, people are working really hard to move a very hard dial. So I think that's the right posture to take, solidarity for what's happening, and then pointing out what's missing. So in other words, like Felice even called it a down payment. So what we're saying is without mandates, there's no timeline and there's no certainty for the private sector. And that is the big variable. No matter what government does on its own and what money it throws at this problem, it's going to take a lot of private sector activity to make this transition happen. So that's what a mandate does. It gives a very clear market signal that is bankable. So that's the main point we're making. Everything you're doing is great, but that'll be a down payment and we still need mandates. So I think these things all come together beautifully. And now that you have the treaty, you could add in if you want, it's all starting to take shape. So the last thing, adopt a district. If you're active and there's an intake form to fill out, please fill that out. Give us an idea of what you've been up to and what you're going to do. A lot of people have already filled it out. It's very exciting. Lavona had an announcement about actions on an action on the 27th. Lavona, I don't know if you want to come on and make that live.
Hi, yeah. Yes, there's a call-in action on this Friday by sponsored by the kind of the faith community. And I put in a link there. It starts at 12 o'clock. There will be a kickoff for it at 12. They'll have some featured speakers, and they will provide you with a script. So there's a link. I'll repost the link. There's a lot of messages ahead of that, but that's what's happening this Friday as one of the opportunities. And there will be, there's also in October, 17th and 18th has been mentioned. The faith community is doing a lot of work around that. And they're actually going to try to circle the Capitol. And it could be pretty exciting. So it might be a good way to mobilize folks if they're especially in the Metro DC area. Thanks.
Wonderful. And I guess that's it for today. So we'll conclude the formal part of the meeting, and I'll stay on just for a few minutes to see if anyone else wants to chat. Thank you all for everything you're doing. Onward, I think it's an exciting year, right? And as scary as it is, our working together is positive thing. So